So Scrapnik Island finished recently, and it's a great opportunity for me to get to talk about something positive that I enjoyed for a change. Isn't that always nice? It's gonna get less views, though. That's always what happens. Anyway, I really liked Scrapnik Island, which is funny, because I didn't think I would when I first read it. I'm going back and, reviewing my initial impressions from back when it first came out. In October, right? I think it came out in October because it was like a Halloween thing. And I remember going into issue number 1 being really cynical about it. And I think the staggered release model really played against this story because I don't think it reads well as 4 separate issues you read months apart from each other. It doesn't hold up to consume in that way. I think now that it's all done, it reads much better as one long 80-page comic. I think the trade paperback is going to be the definitive way to read this. Now that it's all completed, there are things from the first issue that make sense to me now, but at the time when I was just reading it for the first time, I remember going seriously? A dark and stormy night? Really? A dark and stormy night? That's how you're starting? Is this a parody? Am I supposed to be taking this seriously? But, in retrospect, yeah, there's a lot of genre homages. It is doing it on purpose. I'm, surprised by how well, the entire thing held up. Not held, but, it all came together. In the end, I would legitimately give Scrapnik Island, a 10 out of 10. I think it was really fucking good. That first issue, I was, reading it, jumping in, all jaded. Again, never let it be said that I'm the kind of person where I make up my mind about something before I even start it, and I refuse to be, swayed. I went into Scrapnik Island number 1 being okay, let's see what you got, Daniel. Impress me, Daniel Barnes. And reading through issue number 1, I was ugh, this art's really good, though. The art's really good, but But then, after I finished issue number 1, I was okay, that was fine. The art was really good. But, then, every issue after that, issue number 2, 3, and 4, really blew me away. I was very prepared to not be impressed by this comic, and it did end up impressing me. Is this the only good Sonic the Hedgehog comic I've ever read? It's better than Seasons of Chaos, and I liked Seasons of Chaos, but Seasons of Chaos also had a lot of stupid shit in it. After that first issue, I had so much trepidation. Because there were, again, the way it just opens on, it was a dark and stormy night. It really makes you question, where are they going from here? The art and the coloring, I'm just gonna, put them both together. The drawings and the coloring are both combined as, the art. The art and the colors were incredible, but the story was just too genre parody for me to really appreciate it as I was reading it. But now, in full context, with the benefit of hindsight, I think the story really holds up from beginning to end, if you read it as one complete 80-page comic book. And I think it succeeds at everything it sets out to do. It effectively uses Sonic and Tails and the concept of badniks to explore various horror genre conventions and uses cliches as part of its story. The homages and references are subtle, and they actually add to the narrative instead of detracting or distracting from it. It successfully conveys and explores its themes. Fuck it, it has themes! And it even has reread bonuses where you might not notice things at first, but then, things you overlooked on the initial read, but then you, reassess it again later with new context after future story events. And it's like, yo, I didn't notice that at first. This is like, it's like a parallel. It's like a cinematic parallel. Sonic's actually written well. I think he's a little bit of a chatterbox. I think he needs to shut the fuck up a little bit. But the characterization, I think, centrally is really good. I mean, like, I don't have a problem with Sonic Colors, so, I mean, he won't shut the fuck up in that game either, so whatever. The only thing that I think the story had potential to delve into, but was kind of left by the wayside, was that the Scrapniks are in their dilapidated and Frankenstein state because of Sonic carelessly wrecking them. I think exploring the dissonance of them seeing Sonic as both a savior, who ultimately is the reason they're free from Eggman's control, but also he is their destroyer, who mangled their physical bodies in the first place. I think exploring that dichotomy would have been interesting, but aside from Mecha, the Scrapniks basically have no baggage or resentment towards Sonic whatsoever. I just think that was an opportunity that the comic maybe missed out on. But overall, I think it was really good. I doubt anything that IDW is going to produce with the Sonic name on it is going to match this comic, let alone exceed it. Every panel is beautiful. I want this comic printed and framed on the wall. I'm definitely buying the trade paperback when it comes out. Sega, hire this man. And I think Scrapnik Island presents, like, a good case study of, I don't know, what do you call it? Alfred Hitchcock made the movie Psycho. Genre-defining, cinema-altering horror movie, like thriller horror movie, right? In 1998, they did a remake of Psycho with Vince Vaughn in it, and it's a shot-for-shot remake. Like, every single frame of the movie is shot-for-shot exactly the same, but with Vince Vaughn. And it strikes me that there are some people in this world who would look at those two different movies and say, yeah, these are basically the same thing. Why would you say the original is better than the new one? It's the same thing. Like, the literary comprehension of a difference between artistic intent and execution and context, like, it's kind of insane to me that, like, whatever, these two things basically look the same, what's the difference? And the reason I draw that comparison is because when issue number 2 of Scrapnik Island came out, someone messaged me saying, like, oh, there's gonna be a panel in this comic that pisses you off. And they were referring to this one, which I'm showing on screen. And it's the panel where Sonic's, like, trying to squash the beef with Mecha. Again, a little wordy for my taste. I think you could trim a lot of that dialogue out. But they were like, oh, you're gonna get really annoyed by this. And I wasn't. I wasn't annoyed by it. I thought that was a really good panel. I thought that aspect of the story was done really, really well and was perfectly in character for Sonic. And they explained that, like, IDW already had 2 moments where Sonic gave a wordy speech to someone programmed to kill him, asking it to end their rivalry. I have a speech impediment. End their rivalry. That's why I said you'd probably hate it. It's not the same thing, you know? Like, the context is different. Sonic is not preaching from on high about how morally superior he is by ranting about how they need to give Metal Sonic the freedom to choose and everyone deserves a second chance, even the doctor, so let's chalk this up to a rocky start. ignoring the fact that Metal Sonic said he would burn down the world and sift through the ashes to find Eggman, and that nothing has changed about that outlook, and how Surge is literally in the middle of trying to kill him. In Scrapnik Island, Mecha Sonic is currently non-hostile, is living peacefully in a community of outcasts, is conspicuously fighting against his programming, and is displaying redemptive qualities. Sonic is not putting on a performative gesture to put on display how morally righteous he is. He's making the observation that Mecha Sonic is trying to turn his life around, and he's willing to accept that and let bygones be bygones. Again, little wordy, you can trim a lot of this dialogue, but Sonic seeing a former enemy trying to be good and live a peaceful life and being willing to forgive and forget based on what he's observed, that seems perfectly in character to me. And it's not really the same kind of thing as the Metal Sonic and the Surge situation. Metal Sonic was incapacitated, and Sonic had turned him back on and allowed him to go, even though all they did was beat him up in a boss fight. Nothing changed about Metal Sonic's stated goals of finding Eggman again. And then, of course, he magically teleported to wherever Starline had Eggman, because he just magically knew where he was because the plot needed that to happen. And Surge was in the middle of a fight to the death. Both times it rang hollow, because both times Sonic instantly went, "Ugh, you made the wrong choice. Why didn't you do what I wanted you to do like you were supposed to do?" Which makes it clear that those moments were shallow, hypocritical displays of performative morality and not genuine. Context matters, and the context of Scrapnik Island's story makes it actually make sense that Sonic would want to bury the hatchet with Mecha. Sure, the Wikipedia summary of the literal events described is the same, but context matters. Sonic can be written decently in the IDW comics, when someone who isn't a hack fraud is the one writing him, go figure. Like, Daniel Barnes did a really good job on the story in this comic. I really liked, the opening couple pages of issue number 2 in particular. Hey, look, you can tell a coherent story without needing dialogue. Wow! I don't need to have every character constantly yammering on and running their fucking mouth for 5 fucking paragraphs per comic panel. Wow! You can tell a story without dialogue. Wow! Next, you'll tell me Caleb Goliner wrote a 6-page story about Metal Sonic having an existential crisis with only 3 speech bubbles being used throughout the entire story. Oh, and this part, mwah! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! This is going to be really annoying to edit, but it's going to be worth it because bam, 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 bam. That is fucking sequential art right there. That is the format of this medium being used to its fullest. You hit the bottom of the page with Mecha's busted heap, turn the page, boom, Sonic lounging on the exact same spot, paralleling Mecha Sonic exactly. Even the broken foot is the same as the one that Mecha is missing in his panel. This is comic book storytelling. The difference between Daniel Barnes and Ian Flynn in a fucking microcosm. Fucking Sigma's like, oh, how'd you make my Scrapniks be able to talk? Oh, it was easy. New Badniks have built-in fail-safes that stop people from hijacking the signal. You guys don't have it. I made a program to extrapolate and convert the signals into audio. Meanwhile, Ian Flynn, our Lord and Savior, the person who writes Sonic oh so good according to fucking morons, Hawk Wolf's bike isn't as aerodynamic as the others. It needs additional repulsor units support the thrusters to fly. What? Oh my god, he said big words. He said a single 5-cent word. Like, fuck. Like, they both came out on the same day, so that's why the comparison occurred to me. Yeah, see, all throughout issue number 2, Sonic is treating Mecha, and at the end of issue number 1, Sonic's looking at Mecha like he's a sussy baka. Panels like this are what make all the difference when it comes to Sonic turning himself around on Mecha, because it's character development. Sonic's capable of character development. Holy fucking shit. And like, Sonic sees the sunflower in the first issue too, and I thought it was just a Beauty and the Beast thing. It turns out the sunflower is symbolic of the Scrapnik's nature as discarded cast-offs, who nevertheless have blossomed into a newfound life that was never expected of them, and represents their hopes to put down fresh roots in a new home that they can define as their own instead of being controlled by the past they never had a choice in. Thematically, Mecha wanting to plant the sunflower in real soil one day represents how Mecha wants to plant himself into a life that is truly his own to live. You know, it's not just a shallow reference, it's like a fucking theme or something that things stories can have. And I like how much of Mecha Sonic's character was conveyed before he suddenly started talking. I don't have a problem when he started talking, but like, I really like Mecha in the first 2 issues where like everything is conveyed by body language and the blocking with the panel layout and like the camera angle and stuff like that. It leaves enough for the imagination for us to fill in the blanks. Yeah, issue number 2 was when I was like, yo, I think this comic might be good, you guys. This might be a really good comic. Like, I feel bad for however it was I was acting that led someone to believe that I would hate this page. Like, I've harped on about this already, but the difference between this and the Metal Sonic thing is context. Mecha Sonic actually is being a good robot in this comic. Sonic initially has a bad encounter with him and rightfully regards him with suspicion after that, but upon learning more about the Scrapniks and seeing Mecha actually has ambitions to make something of himself and managing to function around each other without fighting, that has caused Sonic to change his mind. That's the thing! In Scrapnik Island, Sonic is changing his mind about Mecha Sonic. He didn't trust him at first, and then he changed his mind and decided, okay, I will accept your redemption, basically. That's the thing. Scrapnik Island is an example of Sonic realizing he was wrong and wanting to make a positive change not only for Mecha's sake, but for himself as well. Whereas with Metal Sonic, he was ignoring reality and disregarding Metal's own feelings to try and enforce his own selfish worldview onto others, and he lashed out angrily when they didn't conform to what he demanded of them. The difference really is night and day. Hold the hedgehog gentle like hamburger. Oh my god, they just keep fucking handing him back and forth. This is fucking hilarious. Yeah, like, if there's any deficiency the comic had, it's like, I wish they explored the conflict of the Scrapniks even more so. I'm so fascinated by, like, the intricacies of how Eggman's robots operates when it comes to their programming and their AI. Like, I played Sonic Adventure as a kid, and Gamma's depressing-ass story left a big impact. That and a lifetime of Mega Man gaming. The idea of the robots attaining sapience and independence is just always so interesting to think about, and it brings new context to Sonic dispatching them en masse. Again, it would have been really interesting if they explored the fact that they're only the Scrapniks because Sonic scrapped them. Like, they seem perfectly secure placing the blame for their cursed existence on Eggman's shoulders, and they hold no ill will towards Sonic. But, like, I don't know, I just thought that would have been interesting to explore more about, like, they only exist as Frankenstein monsters because Sonic wrecked them in the first place. Oh, man. The whole... Man, the pages with, like, Mecha Sonic's fucking PTSD flashback. Oh, that's the shit dreams are made of right there. This comic kicks fucking ass. Like, I can't even dissect this. Like, this panel being, like, the same as the panel... During the glitchy flashback, the glitchy Sonic dialogue is taken from the previous pages, and so is the pose. So he's saying, like, you might look scary, but you're actually trash. I'll bash your brains in, blockhead. And that's mirroring how Sonic said, what's his problem? It's like he's trying to bash my brains in. He's a blockhead. You might look scary, but you're a big softy. Daniel Barnes should sincerely be hired to write the actual mainline comic, because he seems to understand how to use reincorporation, themes, and can actually manage to tell a compelling story with a beginning, middle, and end. And also during this panel... there's a bunch of ones and zeros in the background. I put that through a binary translator. It's trash in binary in all caps. And that was a reread bonus. I didn't notice the binary in the background during this panel. Imagine the idea of rereading a Sonic comic and noticing new things that make me enjoy the comic more than I did on the first read. Imagine the very notion. And again... the way he holds his hand out in the glitchy flashback is exactly the pose is the same. He's holding his hand out. Even the fingers, like the hand's all glitched out, but even the way the fingers are drawn is exactly the same. But with the eyes blocked out and with his... instead of he's smiling, his teeth are like shark-fanged, like all glitched out. I really regret buying the Tales Anniversary comic. Like, of the two comics that came out on that day, Scrapnik number 2 was the one that deserved the money. I think the opening in issue number 3 was like, you know, the whole giving enemies the benefit of the doubt thing. That comes off more like a low-key dig at the mainline comics. Because I can't really think of any examples of that happening in the games, so I'm forced to conclude this is Daniel Barnes low-key being like, at the mainline comics. I don't know, it kind of comes off that way. I don't know how intentional that was. It definitely comes off like a criticism of the mainline comics. How much money do I need to spend to get Sega to fire Ian Flynn and hire Daniel Barnes? What the fuck? This comic is blowing my mind. It's like drinking a cup of ice-cold water after dying in the fucking desert for 5 years straight. I also hope that Nathaniel Fordrain, I really hope that they got paid $17,000 for their work on this comic, because that's how much money they fucking deserve for this incredible goddamn coloring job. I think one of the reasons Scrapnik Island works in a way that the mainline comic very distinctly doesn't is the way the story opens. Sonic and Tails are just flying the tornado when a storm hits. Where are they going? Who cares? Why? Because they're Sonic and Tails, that's why. Shut up. That's the same opening that a lot of the games have. Sonic Rush Adventure literally opens the exact same way. Sonic and Tails flying in the tornado and a storm hits them. Like, so many games open that way. Sonic goes to a new place, meets new people, gets into a new adventure. The entire point of his character is set up to facilitate this. He loves adventure. He loves going to a new place. The why of why is he at this new place is always because he wanted to. You don't need a reason to explain it. Sonic is his own reason. So many fan games use this too. Sonic and the Fallen Star is the same thing. They just show up, cause fuck it. Cause that's the strength that Sonic brings to the table as a video game protagonist. Scrapnik Island uses this. The mainline comic doesn't really use it at all. I can imagine a Sonic game having the exact same opening as what Scrapnik Island opens with. Fucking Sonic Frontiers practically does have this as its exact opening cutscene, almost beat for beat. But for some reason in the mainline comics, Sonic never does anything. He never goes anywhere. He's never traveling, he's never exploring. He's always just seems to be hanging out at or around Tails' house and workshop. The world building is non-existent, and yet at the same time, they seem to be presenting this as a static location that the characters live at and never leave. It's the Sonic Boom problem of the slice of life hometown setting, but at least with Sonic Boom, I knew where the fuck Sonic's house was in relation to other locations. Like, I assume this is just a holdover from Archie. I assume Ian Flynn's just trying to insert fucking Knothole or fucking, like, City, Archie Sonic City, Sonic's Gotham City. I don't know what the fuck Archie had. I assume that's what it is. I assume it's an Archie thing. Of just threats bring themselves upon Sonic's home and Sonic reacts to defend it. He's turned him into a fucking comic book character. The Restoration/Resistance is not a global organization. It's a stagnant group that operates in a specific area, which is completely undefined as a location. Presumably this is an island, since it's populated exclusively by furries. Is it supposed to be the landmass from Sonic Forces? It's so weird! Like, where are we? In the mainline comic, like, I have no idea where we are, and, like, Sonic just lives here. He's never going anywhere. In the games, Sonic is always going to new places. Rare is the game that takes place in a repeat location. He's always showing up somewhere new, doing something new, but not in the mainline IDW comic. Scrapnik Island feels like a Sonic story. It feels like you could make a game out of this comic in a way that you very distinctly could not with the mainline comic. You want to tell me that you could make a fucking game out of the fucking Metal Virus arc? You're gonna tell me that lie? I like, in the final issue when, like, Mecha links his and Sonic's brains together, I like this part where he's like, oh, this sadness and this anger, it's not mine. And then Mecha, like, throws the monkey bot against the wall, and then Sonic's pissed, and it's like, oh, that anger? No, yeah, that anger, that's mine. Like, Daniel Barnes actually gets Sonic as a character. Here's Mecha Sonic going like, you're out of options, you're alone, you've reached your limit. What does Sonic say? That's the thing about limits. They're made to be broken. Mwah! There's Sonic. You found him. You found my boy. And then again, the difference is context. This is something Sonic would say. This right here. This feels like Sonic to me. This isn't Sonic lording over someone from on high with God beam shining down on him, ranting for 5 fucking paragraphs about how he believes the philosophy is everyone needs to have the freedom to do what he says they should do. That's the difference. That's the difference between this panel and this panel. Like, dude, do I really need to explain the difference? Do I really need to explain the difference between, I live for the moment, I want to see the world, find all its thrills and adventures and enjoy them. I want everyone else to have that freedom, the freedom to do that too. Really particular word choice there. I want everyone to have the freedom to do that too. I want everyone to have the freedom to do what I say they should do. I want to do these things, and everyone else needs to do that too. And if you aren't gonna use your freedom to see the world and find its thrills and adventures and enjoy them, well, then you made the wrong choice. Like, this guy is such a fucking asshole. What a piece of shit. Just this comic panel, it is infuriating to me. This disgusting human being running around pretending to be Sonic. This fucking, with the god beam shining down on him from above. As he lords over and just says the most condescending, hypocritical, repugnant, like, totalitarian bullshit that anyone has ever heard in their entire fucking life. Smash cut to this brilliant panel with amazing coloring where the heat and light of the smelter in the background is being used to reflect off of Sonic the darkness of Mecha Sonic's despair, contrasted with the glowing light of Sonic's hopeful message. And it's simplistic, and it cuts right to the core of it. He's not ranting on for 5 paragraphs. He just says it's simple, straight to the point. You give yourself value. No one else. You gotta live for you. That's what it really means to be free. That, it is like a response. It's night and day. What does it mean to be free? Live for yourself. Find your own value. Give yourself your own purpose. Not what I say you should do, not what Eggman built you to do, but what you decide for you. But you gotta be alive to do it, bitch boy, so stop being an emo and take my hand. That's Sonic. This is Sonic. Congratulations, Scrapnik Island. You fucking did it. You wrote Sonic the Hedgehog. I hate issue number 50 even more now, because this is the way Sonic could have been written in the comic. This is the way Sonic could have been written in the comic this whole time? You're telling me we had to deal with 5 years of Ian Flynn sucking his own fucking dick? When we could have had this fucking guy writing the comic? Dude, this guy fucking gets it. Here he is. I finally found him. Sonic the Hedgehog. In a comic book. Holy shit. Who would have thought? Who thought we'd ever see the day where Sonic the Hedgehog was accurately and authentically depicted in the comic book published by IDW? Holy fuck. And again, it blows my mind that there's people out there who are probably going to feel like, oh, there's no real difference. It's the same thing. It's essentially the same thing. Like, yeah, a cake made of, like, batter and sugar and, like, eggs, and a cake made of arsenic and cyanide and mercury, they both got frosting on it. It's basically the same thing. Oh, hey, Tails, we thought you were dead. Yeah, right before I hit the bottom of the chute, I remembered I could fly. Crazy, huh? Oh, yeah, and, oh, man, I was like, because some fucking piece of shit posted spoilers, and I caught a glimpse. But this part, here we go. Oh, shit. Sonic do a cry? Hashtag Sonic do a CRI? Oh my goodness, is he touched and moved by the emotions of the moment? I love Tails' face, too, where he's like, what the fuck, Sonic, you're what? But then, perfection, simplicity itself. Sonic just smiles and says, nah. So it's not like, oh, I got dust in my eye. He's not denying it because he's ashamed of being caught crying. It's a simple, like, happy dismissal, no. It's because it's a statement of fact. Mecha Sonic linked our brains, and that's why. Like, I'm Conan, he's Conan the Chimerian, he cannot cry, so I cry for him.
Why do you cry?
He's Conan, Cimmerian. He won't cry. So I cry for him.
That's what it is. It's Conan the Barbarian thing. Mecha Sonic is crying Mecha Sonic's tears. Oh, I was about to be real mad, but then it's like, no, it's good. They like, my God, I can everyone who's complaining about like my mandates, how are they gonna live with this? How are they going to live in their deluded little fantasy land? Where Ian Flynn, our Lord and Savior, the maestro himself, his hands are tied because Sega, the draconian bastards, they won't let him pen his masterpiece. Sega, those evil fucks, they won't let him draw Sonic crying. How are they gonna, like, countenance this? How are they going to integrate this into their religious fundamentalist worldview, where Ian Flynn is their Lord and Savior? It's like insanity to me. Like, hey, the problem isn't with the physical act of tears falling from Sonic's eyes. The problem is Ian Flynn doesn't fucking write the character right. Imagine. Daniel Barnes wrote the character well, so he gets to do things. Ian Flynn writes the character like shit, so he doesn't get to do things. That's the, like, revelation I came to. Where, like, Ian Flynn had that statement where, like, he gets more feedback about General and Shadow than he does about Sonic and Eggman.
Shadow is weird in that of all the Sonic characters, he has had the most notes of anybody, bar none. I mean, the Deadly Six, we got some very specific direction here and there. Some notes occasionally on Cream. We had a bit of a back and forth over what Knuckles would do here in the current storyline and coming issues. But Shadow, for whatever reason, is under tighter scrutiny, it feels like, than anybody else. It's weird. But there is a moment that I'm hoping will get approved. We'll see. I really can't predict. It's become a very, very tricky balancing act. I thought I had gotten things figured out in the two-parter. Well, it's more of a one-parter because Shadow only appears at the end of the one issue. He and Sonic actually interact in the following one when they're out in Windmill Village. I thought I had figured out what Sega wants from the character now, but I guess if you look at what very little we see in Forces and the far more confrontational single note we got in Team Racing, I think that's the direction they want to go now. So it's the same as it ever was. I'll do what I can with what I'm given. We had to, in the original Shadow and Sonic fight back in the Mr. Tinker stuff, we had to cut 90% of Shadow's dialogue because he apparently just doesn't talk to Sonic. Mm-hmm. He's not a conversationalist. He doesn't debate. He doesn't speak his mind. He doesn't tell people his opinions. He just does. Can you hear the fatigue in my voice?
And the way we kind of interpreted that was he has more creative freedom with Sonic and Eggman compared to Shadow in general. But I realized what it is, like, I realized you have to take it a different way. It's not that these characters have more restrictions and guidelines compared to these other characters. What's happening is Ian Flynn sucks at writing some characters more than other characters. So he writes Shadow in the worst fucking way possible because he's dog shit and doesn't understand the guy's character. And so he gets more feedback notes about Shadow compared to other characters. Not because Sega is more strict about Shadow, but because people don't know how to fucking write Shadow. Like, yeah, if you send in draft after draft after draft after draft where you keep fucking up Shadow's character, then yeah, all of the feedback notes you get are gonna be about Shadow. That's not because they're more strict about Shadow than there are any other character. If you were fucking all the other characters up just as much as you're fucking up Shadow, you get just as many feedback notes about those characters as you're getting about Shadow. If he was writing Shadow perfectly, Sega wouldn't send any feedback about him. If he was writing Sonic badly, he'd get feedback about how he's writing Sonic instead. It was like a revelation. Like, it's not that Sega has mandates about some characters more so that, like, the list of what you're allowed to do with Shadow, the list is longer for Shadow than other characters. No, the problem is, Shadow's a nuanced and complicated character, and people keep fucking him up by trying to turn him into a joke, and trying to turn him into an edgelord, and trying to turn him into this and that. They're trying to turn him into Sasuke Uchiha, or Vegeta, and Sega's like, no, that's not his character. Stop fucking him up. And, like, take this post on Tumblr from Evan Stanley. Like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Look at the words she uses. Look at the way she expresses this. I do my best to help make him quote-unquote better. By the way, read my webcomic. These fucking assholes, they're all the same, and that's why they get the, like, Sega wrapping their knuckles with a ruler when it comes to Shadow. They want to make Shadow into what they want him to be instead of writing him correctly. Of course, all the feedback Sega sends is gonna be about Shadow more so than any other character, because Shadow is the one these people can't fucking write properly, because they want to make him into their shitty DeviantArt webcomic. That's literally what she said. I'm not allowed to write Shadow the way I want. I have to write him the way Sega wants. All these interviews are just idiots bitching that they tried to write Shadow like shit and big mean Sega wouldn't let them. Oh, we wanted to write Shadow as a bumbling yuckster like everyone else in this godforsaken show, but Sega said no, Shadow's not a joke-cracking fuckboy. Don't write Shadow wrong. The way Sega wants him portrayed is a limitation, and they have to work within it to make him better. I can only verbalize the finger quotes so much. They think their Shadow is better. Evan Stanley literally used the words, I still do my best to make it better. She thinks her Shadow is better, and that writing Shadow in character, the way Sega wants him written, is a limitation that they have to work within to showcase his best side. They can't stand that Sega knows their own damn character better than they do, and is trying to get them to write him in a way that is contrary to what they want in how they write Shadow. They want Shadow to be their shitty DeviantArt webcomic. They want Shadow to be Archie Sonic. They want Shadow to be a joke-cracking yuckster. They want Shadow to be Sasuke Uchiha. None of them are saying Sega says the way Shadow was written is correct, and I appreciate having my false, wrong-headed characterization corrected. None of them are acknowledging that what Sega wants for the character is accurate, and Sega correcting them is Sega telling them to fix wrong character. Like, they're fucking up the character. Sega says, hey, fix that. No, they see it as, no, my Shadow was correct. Fuck you, Sega, for telling me what to do. They think Sega's Shadow is wrong, and they just have to grin and bear it. They all think they know Shadow better, and they just take what opportunities they can to sneak their Shadow in under Sega's nose. If you just wrote Shadow correctly, they wouldn't have any feedback to send about it. Take, for example, once again, my dearly beloved, Caleb Goliner over here. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, I'm very sorry. Take his Team Sonic Racing comic that he did. In the special features for that comic, they explain like the writing process behind how they make the comics. The comic started, as most comics do, with selecting a writer and having him pitch the story. Caleb stepped in and knocked it out of the park. The story he pitched was almost exactly what ended up being written and drawn. And they give an example of what like the script he wrote looked like. The script moves from Caleb to the editorial team, who read it and correct any punctuation or spelling errors and give him notes on ways to improve the story. Once it clears their high bar, it moves to Sega for approval. Fortunately, Caleb is such a talented writer that both Editorial and Sega had practically no notes. So Caleb Gollner, I'm so sorry I'm not pronouncing that name right, by the way. So Caleb wrote a Sonic comic that did heavily feature Shadow the Hedgehog in it, by the way, and he got practically no notes from Sega. Ian Flynn writes a comic, and it gets nothing but feedback notes telling him to stop fucking it up from Sega. I think I'm understanding the common denominator here. The common denominator does not appear to be that Sega has stringent and strict stipulations about how you're allowed to write Shadow. It's just that Sega understands how their own characters should be written, and when you don't write those characters correctly, they tell you to fix it. It doesn't matter which character it is. If you fuck that character up, they're going to tell you to fix it. And people just fuck up Shadow more often. The Sonic Boom writers fucked up with Shadow. The Sonic Prime writers fuck up with Shadow. Ian Flynn doesn't understand how to write any of these fucking characters, let alone Shadow. So yeah, I don't know what a good comparison is. But like, just... yeah, all the feedback notes that Sega sends in are about Shadow because people keep fucking Shadow up. If they wrote Shadow correctly, they wouldn't have any feedback notes to send in. Caleb managed to write Shadow correctly, so Sega had practically no notes for him. There's the difference. What's the difference? Oh, you just gotta be a good fucking writer. Imagine the very concept. Maybe if you're a good writer, Sega will allow you to depict Sonic crying. All you gotta do is be a good writer. I know, that's a lot to ask. That's what it comes down to. Like, Scrapnik Island, more than anything, like, not only is it a good comic on its own, it kind of goes to show that Ian Flynn is dog shit and you need to stop letting him write your comic. Like, man, literally, like, Sega hire this man. I would be so thrilled if Daniel Barnes, if Daniel Barnes was scoped to write the actual mainline comic, I would start reading it again. He made Omega say the word meatbag, and I don't like that, but fucking Scrapnik Island was so good. Scrapnik Island was so good. Like, literally... like, I've been, like, Ian Flynn has earned his fucking boot out the door all on his own, but now it's like, dude, replace him with Daniel Barnes. Literally have this guy write the comic. He actually knows how to tell a good story. It's not just things happen and characters act like idiots so that story events can take place. Characters are written well. There's themes. It's like a story that you, like, learn a lesson from. And, like, you read it and you don't feel like it was a waste of fucking time where nothing mattered. It wasn't a mean-spirited, cynical, like, self-aware fucking torture porn fest. The characters were written correctly. Like, dude, why isn't the main comic this good? Apparently it can be. Apparently they could choose to have the main comic be good if they wanted to, and they're just choosing not to, I guess. Whatever. Scrapnik Island was really good. Give it a read, Z. I liked it. Sonic comics can be good. Imagine if we lived in a world where every Sonic comic was good. Wouldn't that be nice?